Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Hope everyone is doing alright today. Let me check my volume. Guys, I want to thank everyone for the support that you guys give to the channel. Either people sending clips, people pointing me in the direction of stories, people whispering things in my ear, which happens sometimes, or I'm like, holy shit, that's awesome. Or people assisting with either the Patreon or Super Chat. All of the stuff helps the channel. So I want to say thank you. I don't say it every video because at some point I feel like it's over the top. But thanks. It is appreciated. I on the show yesterday, I heard a clip of Chris Mathews, and it blew my mind because I gotta let you hear the clip, but is it possible, to any degree that's possible, that the weakness of the Democratic Party is radicalizing the center? Are we at the point of the radical center? I listened to a clip from Chris Mathews, and Chris Mathews brought his musket to the studio. It was an amazing clip. I am listening to the clip, and I've told you before, I can be kind of tribal, and I am completely against war. I don't like this thing of war. By the same token, I am a sucker for war speech, and I am like, where's my fucking pitchfork? Let me get out there, because everything that Chris Mathews said here is right. It's right. Part of the problem, the alienation of the base with the party itself, with the people in office in the political space, the reason why they lose so much. A, they don't represent anything. B, the people who used to support them are coming to some conclusion of that, what I just said. And B and C, or whatever the alphabet is at that point, as Chris Mathews is making the point, we want you to represent us vigorously. And that's not what's taking place. Chris Mathews is giving almost a war speech with a historical context to it that I can't help but to love. I'm not going to show the video itself because I don't know if the video is on YouTube and I don't want to get a copyright strike. But I will play the audio of this because the audio of this is just awesome. So let's do this. Let's flip to this. Chris Mathews, super woke in this moment. Super woke in this very specific moment. Chris Mathews, radicalized, talking about the Supreme Court seat and how the Democratic Party should rain down scorched earth to keep them from stealing another seat. Because let's be very clear. Whatever you want to think about Obama, whatever you want to think about Merrick Garland should be sitting on the Supreme Court right now. And Chris Mathews kind of go even before that, going back to the Bush election, where they stole that seat. And here's another news flash. Even in the stealing of that seat, there was no senator who would come to the aid of Al Gore. Al Gore wouldn't even fight for himself. How weak of a Democrat do you got to be to not even fight for yourself and they're stealing your seat? Everybody knows it. They stole that election. And weak Al Gore, and I have nothing against Al Gore, but a weak Al Gore and an even weaker party stood there gaveling down one representative after the next. Do you know there were hundreds of thousands of African Americans that weren't allowed to vote in Florida? His brother, just so happens, kept him off the rolls. That's great. Gore couldn't even win his own party. Hundreds of thousands of Democrats voted for Bush. Gore couldn't even win his own state. But I'm just making this point of the weakness of the party itself, that even that your base hates your weakness. And part of the reason why so many people who were your base floated away, and in some respects even became antagonistic of what you represented, had to do with his weakness. Chris Mathews Establishment. He is the fucking center line. Chris Mathews himself. Establishment 101. Mr. Fantastic. Chris Mathews has now gotten to the point of saying one party needs to rain hell and scorched earth in order to prevent another seat from being taken. And if you're going to be weak, like you were on the last time, then you will pay. Let's take a look at this. I love this. And I agree with every word he's saying here. Let's see.
Chris Mathews, listening to the president there talk about this. Again, this will be his second pick for the Supreme Court, potentially in 2 years in office. He will have had 2 justices nominated and confirmed for this. What was your reaction?
Well, I don't think we're looking at the fresher history here of this 5-4 court. Of course, as John Meacham just mentioned, they were the ones who threw the election, took it out of the hands of the Supreme Court down in Florida and gave it to George W. Bush. And then, of course, they gave the gun people what they wanted in the Howard decision. Then they gave the money people the decision they wanted in the United Citizens United. And then, of course, just yesterday they gave the anti-immigrant people what this Supreme Court, this 5-4 court, has been pro-Republican, pro-gun, pro-money, and against immigration, anti-immigrant, if you will. And I think the Democrats, as I said a few moments ago, have to fight this tooth and nail. They have to use every process opportunity they have to stop this until next year when we have a new Senate. We don't know whether next year's Senate will be Republican or Democratic dominated. But to give this to the Republicans when they control this Senate, basically 51 or 50 to 49, really, with John McCain perhaps not voting again, to give them this last chance to pack the court 5-4 again, hard conservative. I say this, the base will attack the leadership if they allow it to happen, and they should, because this is time for vengeance for what happened 2 years ago. And if they don't wreak the vengeance now, with 4.5 months to go before the election, they will not look very strong to their base, and I think they'll be under attack, and you'll see more Joe Crowleys go down.
I agree with him. I absolutely agree. He said it is the time for vengeance. Fuck. I love that. I feel that. And using this pivot point of, if you're showing this much weakness, you are going to be punished for that weakness. Just like Crowley went down, your base is going to hate that. The base that remains in the party itself will hate that to such a degree that other Joe Crowleys, other invisible men in their districts will get taken down, just mauled from the inside. I love that. He's just a babbling, really. Vengeance, what does that even mean? He means that from the standpoint of a Chris Mathews, Joe Crowley being taken out of his seat is mind-blowing. That's what I think. And I think they look at this stuff as, oh my God, this guy was just rubbing shoulders with me yesterday, and now he's just lost his seat. He's been there for 21 years, 30 years, however long. Yeah, I think from their perspective, this is to some degree vengeance from the base. I could be wrong. I'm trying to look at it from Chris Mathews' perspective, who sits there essentially rubbing shoulders with all of these people on MSNBC. Look, I love this. It's not because I think Democrats would do anything. I think he's right, though. Look, as a political actor, I've learned, not a political actor, me, but I've learned a lot from Republicans. And I think it's a lesson that Democrats, lefties, anybody else who's in the political space needs to learn. Integrity, values, none of that stuff mean anything. It's not. You are there to represent an interest. Period. Full stop. Nothing else matters. And you're going to represent that interest to the full degree to which you can represent that interest, because you're the avatar of the will of those people. If you are taking $27 per person, the interest that you're representing is essentially the American public. If you're taking large shares of money from small interests, then you're representing that small interest. I think it's really that simple, really. The Democratic Party's problem is that it started taking money from this small group of interests, whereas the smaller segment of the population, the $27, dwindled away to some degree. Because at the end of the day, you're not representing those people, so why should those people give you money? You can replace the money per se, but can you replace the unions? And understand what I mean by that. Can you replace the physical infrastructure and operations that take place all throughout the world and all throughout the country in a political space with people who are motivated and excited to put you in that office? If you remember, Democrats used to represent unions, and those unions used to get those people out to vote for those Democrats. Workers' power. You didn't have this expectation of being able to outrage your Republican opponent. For the most part, you out-labored him, if that makes sense. What happens when labor starts getting attacked and the Democratic Party that's supposed to work in tandem with that labor, for the most part, just looks wistfully as it lays bleeding on the ground? I'm making the point that you've undermined your own house, and I'm talking about the Democratic Party in this case. You've undermined the structures that actually put you in the disposition in the first place. Do you know Republicans have the House now? There was a time where Republicans never had the House. They would have never expected the Republican Party to take the House. It was owned by the Democratic Party at that point. Not anymore. What happened? What happened? You had a changeover of who they represented. And people started to notice, especially with things like YouTube and Vin and videos and everything else. With the media not structured, going down one very specific pipe, other people could get other ideas, and they could see this person talking out the side of their mouth. They could see the chaos that's ravaged. They themselves know the chaos to which they live. And they chose something different, and they regarded the Democratic Party as not representing their interests. Even Chris Mathews has gotten to the point of looking at this and saying, this seems like weakness. This seems like weakness. And he's right. Scorched earth is the way to go about politics. It's honestly, it's chess. This idea of values and, oh my God, this person wouldn't do that because of X. What can you get away with, and what do you want to accomplish, and what are you willing to give to get it? Those are your political landscapes. And I make the point that people sometimes forget that that's what politics is. I learned this in great degree from the Republican Party, and I suggest that lefties should heed Republican Party's advice. If you can pilfer a seat, you pilfer the seat. What's good for the society is less important than what's good for the people who are putting you in that office. I mean, after all, you're being put into office by small interests. Then yeah, it makes perfect sense that you will represent that small interest. I'm saying this in a scattershot way, but I'm trying to get this point across that Chris Mathews is right. That level of politics is politics. What Republicans did is ghastly, and people look at that and be like, oh my God, I can't believe they stole his seat. You may look at them, you may shake your finger at them, but at the end of the day, look at what has taken place from them stealing that seat. Look at the chaos that has taken place from the standpoint of labor, from them stealing that seat. Yes, you wag your finger at them, but they still have that seat. Mayor Garland is still somewhere in bumfuck, wherever, playing tiddlywinks. And Gersh is sitting on that seat, making monumental legislation attacking labor. The idea that any Democrat would vote or be willing to vote for any Trump nominee after what had taken place then would be an utter failure and weakness of the party. And that, if nothing else, should get across to you that there are problems with a party that allows himself to get a seat stolen and still turn around and support the party that did it, when the exact same situation is taking place now that they used to pilfer it in the first place. So this one is 14 minutes too long. Let me see. Sorry, Jamal, is more PR bullshit. Mathews' perspective feeds straight into his tough love democratic reform narratives Democrats have been pushing into the media lately. No, I think Mathews means it. I used to watch when I was younger. I think most of us ended up doing this arc of, oh, MSNBC is a little lefty, and you're watching stuff like Mathews and everything else, like after work or after school, and this is consistent. There's no change in this. I mean, you're talking like several years where Mathews has been this way. Mathews will make this argument about politics being war. And I agree with him on this argument. This is kind of my point when he's saying this is a time for vengeance. I think he means that. Now, the operative word is, what does vengeance means? Right? That's what it means. Like, so us, in my head, I would guarantee you that vengeance is something different than what Chris Mathews is talking about. But I like the language, if that makes sense. The language obfuscates what that means from the standpoint of vengeance. I think in the very specific space, he is talking about whatever political amendment, whatever political trick, whatever political tool, whatever you have at your disposal. If you have to set the fucking place on fire, you do it. You do it. That's his point. Now, catch is, I don't know what they have at their disposal. They should have fought like hell to get Gersh on that kid. Any political trick, tool, setting the place on fire should have been done with Merrick Garland. Not believing, hey, we can wag our fingers at Republicans during the election, and after Hillary Clinton gets elected, we can put in her person. She lost. She lost. Utter weakness. Indeed, the mainstream news anchors are right-wing hacks who can't be trusted. Just look at how much money these people earn. No, I don't disagree with you on your assessment of Mathews. What I'm saying is, what he's saying here is right. I don't understand this issue. It's like right-wingers who... No, I know what it's like. It's like Trump saying something where it's like, and a lefty is like, oh, I can't agree with that because Donald Trump said it. It's like the opposite of this. I don't know what's going on. Matthew is talking about something that's right. And if you look back over some of the stuff that he's saying, this Civil War stuff, Mathews has talked about this before. This goes back years. This is not some new thing that he's bringing up. Progressives need to mobilize the masses into daily political action through community defenses and community service activities. Politics isn't just voting every 4 years. Marshall Villager agreed. Mathews plays bad cop, but often, no, I disagree with you magnificently. Have you seen Mathews? You're portraying Mathews as purely just this kind of, like they're putting a chip in his head. That's not, no. He may be a centrist, yes, but just because he's a centrist doesn't necessarily mean there aren't certain bees that get into his bonnet, if that makes sense. Like Elizabeth Warren, fair weather friend Elizabeth Warren. If you're talking about a banker, she's on the ball. Look, I could leave Elizabeth Warren to her devices if the only thing she had to do was dealing with bankers. I would be a content man. But there's other stuff that you would need to be done. And on those other things, I'm less certain. Well, same thing with Mathews. There will be some things, some quirks, some bees in his bonnets that have just been consistent. The war rhetoric is not. I mean, this war rhetoric is consistent. I've heard him do this shit before. That's him. Before, what's his name was in office. I've heard Mathews talk in these terms before. Now, be very clear. I need to be very clear what I'm saying on here. I'm being very specific to this. Mathews is also the guy who talked about putting like a Democrat and a Republican on one ticket and thought that was a good idea. So, let's not get too far. But in the very specific context of what he's talking about here of, they stole the Bush election, which allowed them to put in a Supreme Court pick. They stole the seat from Obama, which allowed them to put in one pick, and now they're about to put in another pick. You need to use hell and fire and fight tooth and nail to prevent them from doing that. If that is your party, that is what your party should be doing. Just saying. No, Jamal, it's not just hating on Mathews for the sake of doing so. I don't think that's what you're doing. So it's seeing the next altogether predictable move. Don't know, you can see through it. Mathews is on a leash. Mathews doesn't have to be on a leash. Have you ever heard Howard Zinn talk about, Noam Chomsky talk about this, where he would say something like American journalists or commentators, they like to say, look, nobody tells me what to say. I get out here and I say whatever I want to say. But it's like, but you're a canned thing. We already know what you're going to say. I guess my point is, Chris Mathews doesn't have to be on a leash. That's Chris Mathews, if that makes sense. At least that's what I think. I could be wrong. Maybe some, overlord comes down and tells Chris Mathews what he needs to say, or be like, hey, shut the fuck up, Chris Mathews. I think Chris Mathews considers himself a Democrat. I think Chris Mathews is embarrassed that they stole his seat, and that he's angry that they stole his seat, like a Hillary supporter feels that Trump colluded with Russia. I think the sentiment is the same. I think he feels they're not supposed to have taken that seat, and I think he's angry about it. Now, you can call him a corporate hack. Okay. You can say that he's a Democratic, on a leash and all this other stuff. Yes. I wager he is pissed off that they took his seat. I wager that when he wakes up in the morning, he's a Democrat. When he goes to bed at night, he's a Democrat, or somewhat of a centrist Democrat. And I wager, strongly so, that his issue here is they stole that fucking seat from us. That's what I think. He pushes lines. Yes, he pushes lines. I never said he didn't. No one needs to tell him what to say, or at least not. Yeah. Right. Smart enough to know. Yes. Good. Okay, we're in agreement. We agree. I guess you're thinking he's censoring himself because he doesn't want to step over a line. But I'm making the point, I don't think he needs to censor himself, because I think he is that line. I think that's him. And I also think the anger that he's feeling is actual real anger. I don't think he's talking about vengeance for shits and giggles. I think he is pissed off that they stole the seat from his party. I think he is. Now, that doesn't mean that Chris Mathews is going to go off script. That doesn't mean that Chris Mathews is going to say something weird or off the wall, because that's Chris Mathews. That's him. That's who he is. That's nothing that somebody needs to force on him. It's who he is. I'm trying to make that distinction between those things. He doesn't need to censor himself because they put him in that spot, because he is the person who he is. That's all. Manufacturing consent, yes. TJ Yates, he knows what he can and cannot say to keep his job, and he acts accordingly. No, I disagree. I'm just trying to make this point, this distinction, and maybe this is a distinction without a difference, but I think there is a difference. The argument here is whether or not, and keep in mind, this is somewhat of a ridiculous argument because none of us can know, but the argument here is whether or not Chris Mathews is censoring himself. There are things that I want to say out into the world that I can't say because I would lose my job. Or if it doesn't occur to him to operate any other way, in which case nobody has to censor him. He is just who he is. I'm making a point to you that I think Chris Mathews is a Democrat who, yes, he's not going to get on MSNBC and starts cursing. No, he knows he can't do that. But I don't think he's 100% vacuous. I do think that there are things, even if he feels that there's a limit into what he can say, there are things that he actually thinks. Have a go at him look at him when he's having a conversation, I think it was with Hillary Clinton. And 90% of the conversation is Chris Mathews like he's like half asleep in that interview. It's like he's not even there. It's like, oh, look at you. Oh, you're wearing that nice bracelet. It shines your knuckles so nicely. Oh, you're such a great person, Hillary Clinton. I don't even know why Bernie Sanders wants to run. It was like 90% of it was that. Until he gets to the Iraq War. And Chris Mathews hops awake. It's like somebody... And he goes after her on this shit. And Hillary Clinton has this look of like, what the fuck just happened? There are things that he cares about. Now, I don't get me wrong. I suspect, and that interview is a good example of what I'm talking about. And I'm glad I brought that up. He may ideologically be in line with everything that's taking place. He loves her. He thinks she's awesome. He wants her to be president. He will think this is glorious. He could sit there in the White House. He loves it. He's been doing this for years. Nobody has to tell him to do it. It's who he is. That's my point. This is their club. Now, in that Iraq vote, he hated that. He didn't like that. That was something that he particularly, that the bee in his bonnet. And he had no issue. Fuck about this part. yeah, we're friends and all, but what about this? In which case, he reverts back into the doe-eyed Chris Mathews. It's just who he is. They hired him knowing that that was the quantity to which they had. Either they can mold him into it, or he was that quantity. They knew what it was. I don't need to put a muzzle on you because I already know what you're going to say. It's that. That's what I think. What do you want to say? That muzzle, or that I'm not going to do anything to fuck up my job. I think all of us, to some degree, have that in us. Just is what it is. But from the standpoint of him being annoyed and saying this vengeance, I think that's him. Mathews went the way of Madow and Oberman. Yes, that I agree with you. But see, if I remember Garden, he used to be a straight news guy. If I'm trying to think back to what Mathews was like 10 years ago, because that wasn't purely in my political awakening, even though I used to watch the show. They were more straight news. It was only after Oberman where they made that transition and they got into that, like you said, Oberman, Madow, Pillbox, Rush Limbaugh or Alex Jones is the type who pretending to believe in nonsense, he says, but Mathews believes the stuff he says. Are you saying that there's no difference between Alex Jones and Chris Mathews? Yeah, dude. You've jumped the fucking shark on that one. Alex Jones has videos where he's howling about lizard people. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, I'm not taking issue with it. It is what it is. It's his space. You would never find a video of Chris Mathews howling about lizard people. Is it possible that lizard people are running the world? Maybe. Do I believe it? No. And Alex Jones pushing it, hurts his credibility from the standpoint of me believing the shit that Alex Jones says. When he comes out calling Elizabeth Cortez a communist, it hurts his credibility when the woman is a democratic socialist who, if you talk to a socialist, will say that the woman is not even a goddamn socialist. There's a difference. Yeah, there's a difference. No, Alex Jones is playing an act. Chris Mathews believes in what he says. Yes, I think Alex Jones is acting. I do. I think he's acting. But I think Chris Mathews believes. Now, whatever you want to think about what that means, the whole believing and stuff, I do think he believes it. How about people in lizard brains and inflamed ones at that? Yeah. I thought this story was interesting. I got pushback from my audience on it, and fair enough. And it's funny, I don't even think the pushback is all that great. I think we hit on a specific point, and I don't think it's a point that all that much matters because there's no way to evaluate it one way or the next. I'm basing this just off me watching him for all of these years and seeing he's been remarkably consistent. Yes, he's start leaning Democrat once Keith Olbermann came out, but it's kind of a moot point. But I feel you. Alright, I'm going to end this because I have more videos that I want to do. I need to hop over to Brexit or the EU. There's big news in what's taking place in the UK. So that should be interesting. Also, Jared Beck contacted me. Jared Beck has come out of social media exile, seeing that his case has made a step forward. And they've added an amendment to that particular case. So that should be an interesting conversation whenever we can line up with our schedules. So I'll end this here, and I will see you guys shortly. Thanks, everyone. And we are